Alright, right now I'm finishing up this bumper. It's been baked in the sun, all the little pinholes have been found, and so the next step is to get this sanded down and get it ready for the primer step. And gotta take this molding line and sand that down. And what I like to use is a palm sander for that with an 80 grit. Alright, so this has just been grinded down with the sander. Okay, and I got some filler out. I put some filler in any little imperfections I found when I baked this in the sun. That's when I found a lot of the air pockets. And you just put a little bit of filler over it, and then I like to sand that down with the sander real quick before I do my initial blocking with the 180 grit. You want to find all the air pockets that you can. So now it's ready for block sanding, 180 grit. Alright, so what I'm doing now is I'm block sanding this bumper because I want it nice and straight, especially on this 4-season bumper. These gotta be straight up here. That was the design, for a straight look. Any imperfections in the layout will come right out just by the 180 grit that I'm sanding it with. In the seam line, you always want to block that one because that could have some variations, you know, on one side from the other where that seam was. It could be lower or higher depending on how that seam was made in the mold. So I'll go around blocking this whole bumper by hand on a little block because that's going to come out real nice like that. If I just use the palm sander, just do it like that, you could do that, but this method is preferred, at least by me, for you know, a little bit higher quality job. You want to do it by hand. Not to say you can't use power tools. There's always something you could use the power tools for, but I'm just telling you, it's my preference to do it by hand. It takes a little longer, but it won't bite you in the butt later on. This will leave swirl marks. See that? Swirl marks in it. And sometimes you primer it and sometimes your primer will shrink. I use poly primer. It doesn't shrink hardly at all, but sometimes primers can shrink through, and then you go to paint your car and you can see little swirls in it under the paint. So this will eliminate that as well if you block sand it, because this will leave tiny little scratches instead of swirls. You see the difference there? And if you did go over it with that, say if somebody did use a palm sander, it's okay. You could always block it out, even if it's been, like I could go over this whole thing with a palm sander and then just block it out to get out those lines. It'll take me a little longer to get those lines out, because they will come out, especially if they're not too coarse. I'm using 80 grit on the palm sander. See all those little swirl lines, they're all gone already. So I'll finish this up. I want to note that the seam line always has a couple little air pockets in it just because of the fact it's on a seam. Like right here, I gotta go and fill those in. I want you to know I go around with the pick, make sure I get all the air pockets out. When I find an air pocket, I'll dig at it until I get to the bottom of the air pocket, because if I just go over it without doing this, the air could be trapped lower, and then you could still pop out later on. So I'll go around making sure every little air pocket is found. And again, here's a seam line. I got to put a skim coat of filler here because there's variations high and low from that spot, and you want to have that nice and flat. Alright, here we have the bumper all nice and block sanded from the top. Nice and smooth. And next, I'll go and fill in any imperfections on this line here, going all the way down and all the way across. And then we'll sand that out again. Alright, the part's been cleaned with some Prep-All. Spray it on, you wipe it off. You want to use the Prep-All because your filler is not going to stick to dust from sanding. So I make sure I put some Prep-All on there, wax and grease remover, whatever you got to clean this off right before you add your filler. And here I am using some high quality Platinum Plus filler by 3M. I didn't use the Bondo crap. You want to use the good stuff. If you're gonna have a part and you want good quality, use good materials, use good tools. You won't have a problem later. Alright, got a nice skim coat there. Skim coat means it's real thin. And you just want to do that throughout the whole bay here where the mold line is, so you can get that nice and flat again. Same thing with the bay. Got a line there that I went over, and a little bit right here. So I'll let that set up and dry. It's fairly hot in here, so it's probably already dry. Yep, it's only been 5 minutes and it's dry to the touch. So I could already start grinding this down, sanding it down. But yeah, that's how you want to get it, nice and smooth, nice and thin. Don't put it on too thick. That's when people get problems with filler, when they put real thick chunks of filler. You gotta do this by layers. But this usually only takes about one layer because it's just a nice thin coat over that seam line. So I'm gonna block this with some 80 grit on a little block here and get off all the high areas on the edges before I go over it with 180 grit. Alright, just got finished sanding that with the 180 grit block after the 80 grit, and you can see nice and smooth now. Okay, that's what you want, nice and smooth. And again, the reason why you got to put a skim coat here is because I got a seam line that runs right here, right where my finger is at, my index finger. And there's always going to be a little bit of imperfections on that seam line. So I like to skim coat it, smooth it over. Same thing with here, there's a seam line here going through this bay. So I smooth that over. You can see I got one little spot here I got to fill in one more time, just in this one little area. Okay. But other than that, it seems like the one pass is all it needed because it's just a real light coat. Maybe a little bit right here on the edge. One little coat there, one more, and a little bit right here. There's one more coat right there. And then we should be good on that. And then I'll flip it over, start sanding the bottom side. You can see out of the filler that I added, the skim coat, how much of it is actually not even on the part itself. On the floor, over there. So yeah, we're talking a real fine skim coat. Okay, you can see most of the filler is actually dust now, right there. Alright, got my second pass of filler in those spots that I found. A couple little spots I missed there. And a little more right here that I just wasn't happy with. Still a little bit of a low spot in there. So after that, that should be good for those areas. Still got to sand this one down here, and then I'll start working on the rest of it right now. This YouTube episode has been brought to you by Wurnsgrüner German beer. Just kidding, guys, but had to do that because I'm thirsty and I'm hot and I need to take a break, and that's what I'm having a break with. Nice German beer. Gruner. Alright, everything's smoothed out. All imperfections are found and taken care of. It's ready for primer. Alright, just cleaned up my gun, and this is the primer that I use. It's a polyester primer, feather fill by Evercoat, and this thing's black color. Alright, here's the bumper. I just primered it in that primer that I just showed you guys in the video. Polyester primer. I use it because it doesn't shrink. But one thing about this primer, you got to paint it right away. Don't put this on your car and expect to keep it there. You want to paint the bumper right away. This primer is not meant to be in the elements, not meant to be in the sun. No primer is, except for epoxy primer. That one can handle a little bit of rain, but still, even in epoxy, you don't want to leave it too long on the car without painting. So that's the bumper. Came out real nice. I put it on thick right here and a little bit spot right here because I messed up on my spray fan when I first started out, but that'll sand out with the 320 to 400 grit sandpaper right when you're about to paint this thing. All right.